the reading comprehension exam level 1. And yes, there's a PDF file for this test, right? This exam. Yes, you can go to the pinned comment that will show you a link that will show you the PDF file. Okay, so we will be looking at the PDF file, the exam, and we will be breaking it down in this video. Okay, so let's start with question number 1. You can see that Sujin and Kite, they are talking about Minju, a person named Minju. And of course, yes, when you're using someone's name in a polite and formal way, yes, you would attach she behind it. So we're talking about Minju, but when we are actually using her name to talk about Minju, we're saying Minju 씨. So 수진 is saying 민주 씨 왜 기분 안 좋아요? So she's saying, yes, well, why is 민주 씨's mood not good? Right? So in Korean, when you're saying someone is not in a good mood, they say 기분 안 좋다. Of course, 좋다 was inflected into 좋아요. Good, the display form of good, was inflected into 좋아요 according to the rules of inflection route number 1, right? Okay, so that's why we're saying 기분 안 좋다. 기분 안 좋아요. Mood is not good. As a way of saying, yes, I'm in a bad mood. Someone is in a bad mood. So Sujin is saying, yes, why is 민주 씨's mood not good? Why does it seem like she's in a bad mood? And then Kite answers by saying 서점에 샀던 책 잃어버렸다고요. Okay, so now based on the conversation, which of the followings can you deduce to be true? So let's look at the 4 options we have. Okay, so number 1, Sujin is annoyed. Okay, now I wouldn't say this is the answer. Now, I'm not saying Sujin is definitely not annoyed. That could be the case. I'm just saying, yes, in this conversation, there is nothing that necessarily indicates that Sujin is annoyed. So she could be, but yes, nothing is necessarily indicating that. So we should say, yeah, number 1, I cannot deduce that to be true based on the conversation. Okay, and number 2, this is not the first time Kite is saying this. Kite is saying 서점에 샀던 책 잃어버렸다고요. So it seems like Kite is saying, well, yeah, she lost the book that she bought at a bookstore. So that's why Minju 씨's mood is not good. So this is not the first time Kite is saying this. So I would say number 2 is the answer because the 다고요 ending would be a shapeshifter. So an irregular ending. What is an irregular ending? Well, an ending that keeps on shapeshifting according to 2 factors, right? Are you going to give it to a verb, adjective, or noun? And plus, what is the tense? So, yes, the 다고요 ending is a shapeshifter. So right now, I'm giving it to a verb past tense, right? Because I am giving it to lose, 잃어버리다. Okay, so in that case, it would look like double S, 다고요, and it belongs to inflection route number 1. Okay, so yes. Now, what the 다고요 ending does is it indicates that, yes, the speaker is saying something that they already said. So they're repeating it. And usually, when they are repeating it, so it's basically the same with saying, hey, I said something, something. So for example, let's say, I told my friend, hey, it's cold outside. And for whatever reason, he keeps on asking me, what did you just say? I'm sorry. Then I can say, for example, I'm going to say, I said it's cold. So I'm repeating what I already said. So in that case, I'm giving it to an adjective in present tense, right? Because I'm saying, I said it is cold. I'm not saying it was cold, it will be cold. I'm using cold in present tense. So in that case, it would be just 다고요, and it would be a no route ending. So this is what I mean by irregular ending, shapeshifter. Okay, so in that case, for example, if I'm going to use this version of cold, 춥다, then because I said this is a no route ending, it means I can just remove 다 and then immediately attach it, right? So I would have said 춥다고요. So now I'm saying it's cold, but I'm basically saying, hey, I said it's cold. This is not the first time I'm saying it. I'm repeating it for whatever reason. Either you didn't hear clearly what I said, or, for example, you seem to be ignoring me. Maybe you were distracted. Maybe you didn't understand what I said. So for whatever reason, the 다고요 ending is used when you are indicating that you are repeating something that you already said, or, yes, you are repeating something, you are saying something that shouldn't have been necessary to say. You should have already known this. So it's kind of already, it was already implied. Something is obvious. You should know this. But because, for whatever reason, you seem to not know it, it was already implied, but I'll say it. So I'll imply it again. So anyway, the point is, the 다고요 ending is used when, yes, you're indicating that you are repeating something. And usually, yes, now, 다고요 is usually used when people are indicating that they are a little bit annoyed by the fact that, a little bit frustrated by the fact that they have to say it again and again and again. Okay, but anyway, so we can see that 기태 used a version of lose, 잃어버리다. So the reason why Minju is in a bad mood is because she lost her book. So lose. But once again, he used the 다고요 ending, but the verb past tense version of it. So therefore, according to the rules of inflection route number 1, yes, he changed, removed 다, of course, changed 이 into 여, and then attached the ending. So now we have 잃어버렸다고요. So it's basically 기태 saying something along the lines of, hey, I said she lost, and then whatever, in this case, the book. Okay, so yes, because we have the 다고요 ending, we can deduce that number 2, this is not the first time 기태 is saying this, to be true. So I would say number 2, yes, is an answer. Okay, and then number 3, there is something grammatically incorrect. I would say, yes, number 3 is also an answer. There is something incorrect because, well, actually, there are 2 things. Number 1, now, first of all, we're saying something, basically, she lost the book that she bought at a bookstore or at the bookstore. If that's the case, I wouldn't have attached 에 to the location word bookstore. I would have attached 에서. Now, why is that? Because, yes, when you're placing in, on, at with some kind of a location word, for example, meet at the restaurant, or sleep in the living room, dance on the stage. So when you're placing in, on, at with some kind of a location word, yes, in Korean you have to choose between 2. Is it going to be 에 or 에서? And how do you decide? Now I always say, ask yourself a question. There will usually be a verb somewhere if you're saying in, on, at plus a location. Now ask yourself, did something, according to the context, or someone, did someone or something get to the location by doing the verb? In this case, what is the verb? I said, yeah, the book that she bought at the bookstore. So the verb buy. Did Minju, who bought a book at the bookstore, did Minju get to the bookstore by buying? Of course not. She went to the bookstore by walking or maybe driving, whatever. Okay, so always ask yourself, did someone or something get to the location by doing the verb? If the answer is yes, then 에. If the answer is no, then 에서. So once again, right now, the answer should be no. Minju did not get to the bookstore by buying the book. Okay, so it's a no. It should have been 서점에서 instead of 서점에. Oops. Okay. And then, now, the second part that I would grammatically fix is 샀던. Okay, so now, right now, we're using relative pronoun. Now, what is a relative pronoun? So, a relative pronoun usually takes the form of that in English, right? So, when you're using a noun, but you want to give it some kind of a story. So let's say, yeah, right now the noun is book, but it's not just a book. I want to give it a specific story using a verb. A book, but not just a book that she bought at the bookstore. Okay, so now that is the relative pronoun, something that enables you to, yes, imbue some kind of a story into a noun using some kind of a verb. So, in other words, give the noun some kind of a story. So this would be the relative pronoun. Book that she bought, 민주, that is, yesterday. I'm sorry, not yesterday, at the bookstore. At the bookstores, 서점에서. Okay, so yes, right now we're using the relative pronoun ending. And once again, yes, when you're using the relative pronoun ending, you also have to once again keep in mind the fact that it is a shapeshifter. Okay. So, once again, when you're using a relative pronoun and therefore you're telling some kind of a story that will become a part of the noun, well, yes, you usually use it only with verbs. So it is a shapeshifter. But once again, because you usually only use it with verbs, you don't have to think about whether you are giving it to a verb, adjective, or noun. You just have to think about the tense. But anyway, depending on the tense of the verb that is a part of the story, yes, the relative pronoun ending will look different. Okay, so now, if you're saying verb in past tense, yes, the N ending, inflection route number 2. So this is why I'm saying we once again have to fix something from a grammatical perspective. Because once again, yes, now, yeah, we have a relative pronoun and the tense of the verb in the story is in past tense. So this decides what the relative pronoun looks like. Yes, in this case, it could be either the double S 던, inflection route number 1, or it could be N, inflection route number 2. Okay, so what's the difference? And why am I saying that I don't want to use this? I want to change it into N. Because, yes, double S 던 is not very colloquial. It's not for everyday life normal situations, conversations. It's more so used when you're, for example, just being poetic Korean, or when you're being super dramatic or super sentimental. Okay, so for example, let's say when you're saying, yeah, I still always cry whenever I think about the song that my dad sang for me when I was 7 years old. So I'm using the relative pronoun ending because I'm taking the noun song, but I'm giving it a story. I'm not just saying a song that my dad used to sing for me every day when I was 7 years old. I always cry when I think about that. Okay, so yes, in that case, maybe I can use the double S 던 version of the relative pronoun ending when you have a verb in past tense. But once again, yes, right now, I'm not speaking poetic Korean and I'm not necessarily being super dramatic or emotional or sentimental. Okay, so in this case, yes, the better version would be the relative pronoun ending, that is, when the verb in the story is in past tense, just the N ending, inflection route number 2. Okay, so I'm not going to say 샀던, I'm going to say 산, right? Inflection route number 2. 책. Okay. Okay, so this is what I mean by relative pronoun. So the N is playing the role of that. Once again, a relative pronoun is that, in this case, when you're using it to have a story, a whole story that involves a verb somewhere, yes, be imbued into a noun. So not just a book that, relative pronoun that she bought at the bookstore. Okay, so she bought at the bookstore is a whole story that is imbued into this noun. So it's technically now a part of this noun. Okay, so if the noun is the object, they are all the object. So we're saying Minju lost the object, what? The book that she bought at the bookstore. Okay, so verb lose, lost. Object, what? What did she lose? The book that bought at the bookstore. Okay, so that's why I would have said 서점에서 산 책 잃어버렸다고요. And once again, we know that 기태 is saying this a couple of times, at least twice. And therefore, 기태 is now a little bit frustrated by the fact that he has to repeat this. Let's say 수진, just forgot that 기태 told him this, or whatever the reason may be. So, yes, I would have said 서점에서 산 책 잃어버렸다고요. So that's why number 3, there is something grammatically incorrect. That would also be the answer. Okay, let's go to number 4 then. 기태 also heard it from someone else. Okay, now this could be the case, but there is nothing that necessarily indicates that in the conversation. So based on the conversation, I cannot deduce that to be true. It could be, but I don't know. I cannot deduce that right now. Okay, so for question number 1, the answer would be 2 and 3. Okay, so this sentence would be, yes, the answer for, of course, question number 2. Question number 2 says, if there is something grammatically incorrect, describe how you would fix it. So the answer for question number 2, I would have said, 서점에서 산 책 잃어버렸다고요. Okay. Now let's go to question number 3 then. So once again, based on the conversation, which of the followings can you deduce to be true? Okay, so this time 기태 says 네. Yeah, 기태 is answering, 수진 calling him. So I guess 수진 called 기태, hey 기태. So 기태 is saying 네. And then 수진 says 저 영화 되게 재미있는다면서요. Okay, so this is the conversation. Now let's look at the 4 options that we have. Number 1, there is something grammatically incorrect. Okay, so I would say this is an answer because there is something grammatically incorrect. Okay, so let's take a look at, yes, how I would fix it then. So first of all, right now, we're using reported speech, right? What is reported speech? When I'm relaying information, so when I am not the original source of some kind of information, when someone told me something, therefore I'm telling you. That's when you would use reported speech. When someone told me something, therefore I'm relaying that information to you. So once again, when I am not the original source of this information. In other words, in English, for example, when you're saying something like, I heard that, or someone told me that. Okay, so now when you're using reported speech, now reported speech is very complicated because it's a shapeshifter, an irregular ending, and let's say, I would say, it shapeshifts the most. It's one of the irregular endings, in other words, shapeshifters, that shapeshift the most. Okay, so usually when you see reported speech, the reported speech ending, now sometimes it will end with 돼요, and sometimes it will end with 다면서요. Okay, so what's the difference? The difference is 돼요 is when the reported speech is delivering information that the listener already knows. Already doesn't know, The 돼요 is used when the reported speech is delivering information that the listener does not know. 다면서요 is when the reported speech is delivering information that the listener does know. Okay, so what do I mean by that? I'll show you an example. So, let's say, now this is my 친구, my friend. So he invited me, 저, and let's say a third person. Let's say this person's name is, let's say her name is Minju. So my 친구 invited me and Minju to his house for dinner. Okay, now Minju calls me though and says, hey, can you please tell your friend that I can't make it today? I'm very sick. Okay, so she calls me. So my 친구 asks, when I show up to his house, my 친구 says, oh, why are you here alone? Where's Minju? I'm gonna say, oh, she told me that. I heard from her that she's sick, so I'm telling it to you right now. Okay, so my 친구 did not know this. When I say, I heard that she's sick, therefore she can't come, or she told me that she's sick, therefore she can't come. Now this is information that my 친구 did not know, because if he did, he wouldn't have asked, where's Minju? Why are you here alone? So, yes, in that case, reported speech is delivering information that the listener does not know. Right now, I'm talking to my 친구, therefore he is the listener. I'm saying, I heard that Minju can't come. So when I say, I heard that Minju can't come, that sentence that is reported speech is delivering information that the listener does not know. Okay, on the other hand, let's say this time Minju is talking to me. Minju says, hey, is your friend okay? So she's talking to me, and I'm gonna say, huh? Is my friend okay? Yeah, did something happen to him? I don't know why you're asking that. So Minju says, oh, you didn't know. I heard that your friend is sick. So I didn't know that. So I'm going to call my friend and I'm gonna say, hey, I heard from Minju that you are sick. So when I say, I heard that you're sick, or Minju told me that you're sick, when I'm saying that sentence in reported speech, that's information that the listener does know because my friend is the one who's sick. So if I call him and say, hey, I heard from someone else, I heard from Minju that you are sick, that reported speech is delivering information that the listener does know. Okay, so in that case, reported speech would usually end with 다면서요. Okay, so once again, when reported speech delivers information that the listener does know, when the listener does not know, and when the listener does know. Okay, so once again, when reported speech is delivering information that the listener does not know, 돼요. When it is delivering information that the listener does know, 다면서요. Okay, so first you have to identify that. Is the reported speech delivering information that the listener knows or not? Okay, now once you know which category you are in, then you can think about, yes, the fact that it will shapeshift. Okay, right now which one are we using? Yeah, we're saying 다면서요. So I guess 수진 is saying something like, I heard that movie is very interesting, but she feels like the listener Kite already knows this. For example, Kite already watched the movie, or Kite is the one who were always praising this movie, or whatever the situation may be. Sujin is saying, hey, I heard that movie is very interesting, and I'm asking you because I think you know best about this movie. So yes, Sujin is using reported speech. I heard that, or someone told me that, but she believes that this reported speech is delivering information that Kite already does know. Kite already knows that this movie is interesting. Okay, so we're going to use 다면서요. Now the question is, which version? Yes, we're using the adjective interesting and in present tense. We're not saying it was interesting. I'm not saying I heard that it was interesting in past tense. I'm not saying it will be interesting. I'm saying I heard that the movie is interesting. Adjective. So now, when you're giving it to an adjective in present tense, then It's the no route ending 다면서요. The no route ending 다면서요. Okay, so yes, in question number 3, it says 는다면서요, right? So this 는 has no space to stay. So 는다면서요 can stay when you're giving it to a verb in present tense, but only when the display form of the verb ends with a consonant once 다 is removed. For example, when you're saying 먹다, eat. So once 다 is removed, it ends with a consonant. So you can say, hey, I heard that you eat seafood. 먹는다면서요. Okay, so it's for when you're giving it to a verb in present tense and when the display form of that verb ends with a consonant once 다 is removed. So it's not for the situation that we have right now. We have an adjective in present tense. So it shouldn't have been 재미있다. 재미있다. So it shouldn't have been 재미있는다면서요. 는 shouldn't have stayed because interesting is an adjective. So I should have just removed 다 and then immediately attached 다면서요. So I'm using the reported speech ending, but when reported speech is delivering information that the listener already does know, plus the adjective present tense version. Okay, so when you're using reported speech, you have to be very meticulous and pick the right version of the ending. Okay, so 재미있다면서요. So that's how I should have said it. So that's why number 1 is an answer. There is something grammatically incorrect. Okay, so I would have fixed this. Okay, now let's go to number 2 then. So 기태 is holding a poster of the movie. Okay, now I wouldn't say this is the case. I would say, yeah, this is not true. Now, what tells me that this is not true? 저, when I said that movie, when Sujin said that movie, this automatically tells me that it's not likely that 기태 is holding a poster of the movie. Because, let's say, this is Sujin. Hey, 기태, I heard that that movie is really interesting, very interesting. And let's say 기태 is holding a poster of the movie. This is 기태. Okay, now, I don't think this is the case because the version of 저 수진 used. So, yes, there are 2 versions of that you can use when you're placing that in front of some kind of a noun, right? 저 영화, that movie, or 그 영화, that movie. But 그 is used in 2 cases, right? Number 1, whatever that is, that movie, whatever that indicates, is not within sight at all. We're not looking at it. So, for example, if I'm going to say, talk to my friend and say, hey, do you remember that palace that we saw when we traveled to Egypt 5 years ago? Now, we're not looking at the palace, right? Let's say we're in Korea right now. Of course, I can't see the palace. So in that case, it would be 그 palace. Okay, and number 2, so 그 is used in 2 cases, right? Number 1, when whatever that is not within sight. Number 2, when whatever that is significantly closer to the listener than it is to the speaker. Right now, Sujin is the speaker. Hey, I heard that that movie is very interesting. 저 영화 되게 재미있다면서요? And 기태 is the listener. But if 기태 is holding the poster, then whatever we're talking about, whatever that is indicating, that movie. So I'm pretty sure that Sujin is talking about the movie in the poster. So if Sujin is looking at the poster and therefore is saying, hey, that movie, I heard that that movie is very interesting. Then that movie right now, what that is indicating is closer to the listener than it is to the speaker. So therefore, in that case, 그 would have been used instead of 저. So, yes, but we know that 저 was used. When is 저? When whatever that is, that movie in this case, is not closer to the listener and it's not closer to, not closer to the speaker, but not closer to the listener either, when it is roughly equally located away from both of them. So because Sujin used the 저 version of that, now I can picture that Sujin and Gi-tae are standing like this pretty much. And the movie, the poster of the movie, must be somewhere here on the wall. Okay, so it's not significantly closer to the listener, it's not significantly closer to the speaker either. Okay, so now because Sujin said 저 영화 instead of 그 영화, this is what I'm going to naturally, yes, picture inside my mind. Okay, so that's why I can say number 2, Gi-tae is holding a poster of the movie. I wouldn't say I can deduce it to be true. So number 2 is not an answer. Number 3, Gi-tae didn't see the movie. Once again, this is not true because Sujin used a little while ago the 다면서요 version of reported speech, which tells me that, yes, Sujin is relaying information using reported speech to relay information that was given to her, but she knows that this information already, yes, is something that the listener knows. So it's likely that Gi-tae already knows that this movie is interesting because he watched it. Okay. So I wouldn't say Gi-tae didn't see the movie, I would say Gi-tae did see the movie. Okay, and then number 4, Sujin also heard it from someone else. Yes, once again, now that is true because we're using reported speech. Once again, what is reported speech? When, yes, someone told me, therefore I'm telling you. I'm just relaying information. So it means that Sujin also heard it from someone else. Someone said it to Sujin, therefore Sujin is saying it to Gi-tae. Okay, so therefore the answers for question number 3 would be 1 and 4. And once again, yes, we know the answer for question number 4. I said a little while ago, I wouldn't have said. So question number 4 says, if there is something grammatically incorrect, describe how you would have fixed it. Yeah, we just did talk about it, right? I would have said 저 영화. Sujin would have said 되게. But once again, because we're giving it to an adjective in present tense, 재미있다면서요. 재미있다면서요. So I wouldn't have said 재미있는다면서요. Once again, I'm not spacing it out here. It's just because of the line. Okay, so no 는. So question number 4, I would say, yes, I would have said 저 영화 되게 재미있다면서요. Not 있는다면서요. Okay, so now let's move on to question number 5 then. Now, based on the conversation, once again, which of the followings can you deduce to be true? Sujin says, 민주 씨 여기 자주 오지 않아요? And Gi-tae says, 몰라요. 친구 만나려고 종종 오나 봐요. Okay, so now Minju is saying, doesn't Minju come here often? And Gi-tae is saying, I don't know. Well, I guess she comes here sometimes, every now and then, to meet her friends or friend. Okay, so now let's go to the 4 options that we have. So number 1, now Gi-tae is in a good mood. I would say this is not true. If I had to guess, if I had to bet, I would say Gi-tae is not in a good mood. How do I know that? Yes, when he said, I don't know. 모르다. Okay, so yes, if I'm gonna say 모르다, of course it's the display form, right? So if I were to give it the actual form present tense ending, yes, according to the rules of inflection route number 1, I would have said 몰라요. I would have inflected it into 몰라요. Yeah, that is technically correct. But, now this is not technically something wrong to say, but now we have a nuance ending, the 겠어요 ending, right? Of course, 겠어요 can do a lot of things, but one of the things that it can do is to be a nuance ending. The nuance ending that has the function of imbuing the nuance, I put in effort, or I am putting in effort. So, and it's a no route ending. So usually when people say 모르다, which is I don't know, they usually use it with the 겠어요 ending to imbue the nuance of I put in effort, I tried. Because when someone asks you something, they're looking for some kind of information, right? And you don't want to make it sound like you're saying, yeah, just don't bother me. Don't bug me. Maybe I can find the information that you're asking for, but I don't want to deal with this hassle, this headache. Of course, that's not that, you don't want to sound like that. So that's why when people say don't know, usually they say 모르겠어요 to imbue the nuance of I tried, I put in effort. So that it sounds like I really tried to give you the information that you're looking for, but I really don't have it. I'm sorry. So it sounds much more polite. So what could happen is if you really just say 몰라요, just the actual form present tense of it, then it could sound like you're just saying, yeah, just come on, don't bother me. Yeah, you're bugging me. Go away. I don't know. Okay, so because Gite said 몰라요, it seems like Gite is either just annoyed, outright annoyed, or at least very indifferent. Okay, so I wouldn't say Gite is in a good mood. So number one, not the answer. Number two, there is something grammatically incorrect. Okay, yeah, so this would also be true because now when you're placing to in between two verbs, okay, when you're placing to in between two verbs, now, of course, there are more exceptions and variable. There are more variables, but right now I'll just explain the big two. Okay, so when you're doing this, of course, first of all, in Korean, you have to first have the order between the two verbs reversed. So what do I mean by verb to verb? You know, when you're saying something like, I bought it to use it tomorrow. So bought to use. So we have the verb bought and we have the verb use. Or when you're saying, I came to find my friend. Once again, we have to in between two verbs, came and find. Okay, so now, then it's either going to be 려고, so you give the first verb in Korean, the last verb in English, the pink verb, the 려고 ending, inflection route number 2, or you give it the 러 ending, right? So they will play the role of to. So once again, inflection route number 2. So it's either 려고 ending or the 러 ending being given to the pink verb. So how do I know? Yes, when the green verb is either come or go, then that's when you use 러. Okay, so when the green verb is either come or go, or any kind of a variation of come or go, like come out, go back, or anything, then it's 러, not 려고. So that's why right now Gite says she comes sometimes to she comes. She comes to meet. So we have a verb come to meet, but yes, the green verb is come or go. It's come. So come to meet. Therefore, it shouldn't be 려고. It's 러. Okay, so I would have said, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have erased that. I would have said 친구 만나러 종종 오나 봐요. Not 친구 만나려고. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have erased that because I still need it. Okay. So of course that would be the answer for question number 6. If there is something grammatically incorrect, describe how you would have fixed it. Yeah, this is how I would have fixed it. Not 려고, 러. I would have said 친구, and also 몰라요. I would have said 모르겠어요. So 친구 만나러 종종 오나 봐요. Okay, and of course, the 나 봐요 ending is also a shapeshifter, right? The 나 봐요 ending imbues the nuance of guess. So 기태 is saying, I don't know. I guess she comes sometimes, every now and then, to meet her friend. Okay, so 나 봐요. So once again, the guess ending, but it's also a shapeshifter. So yeah, when you give it to a verb in present tense, it looks like 나 봐요. Okay, a no route ending. So that's what you have right now. Okay, so the full sentence, I would have said, yeah, 모르겠어요. Sorry, I'll write it here. 모르겠어요. 모르겠어요. 친구 만나러 종종 오나 봐요. 모르겠어요. 친구 만나러 종종 오나 봐요. Okay, so yes, number 2, there is something grammatically incorrect would be an answer. Number 3, Sujin thinks that Minju comes here often. Yeah, I would say she does. Because now there are a couple of ways of placing don't in front of a verb, right? Method number 1, to place 안 in front of the verb. Number 2, placing the verb and then giving it the 지 않아요 ending. And then number 3 is, functionally speaking, completely in its own lane, right? When you are telling someone not to do something. Hey, don't do that. Don't run. Okay, so yes, number 3 is when your sentence is an imperative, when you're telling someone not to do something. If not, then it's either number 1 or 2. And number 2 is always, well, usually the poetic trap, right? It sounds extremely poetic. Okay, but there are very rare exceptions in which it can be used also in a colloquial setting, right? And one of those rare exceptions is when you're asking a question, but a leading question. When you already think that the answer is yes, or you want the answer to be yes. So if someone asks you a question in the form of 지 않아요, then it means that, yeah, they're asking a question, but they already think the answer is yes, or they want the answer to be yes. So because 수진 said, 민주 씨 여기 자주 오지 않아요? Doesn't come. Doesn't she come? Okay, she doesn't come. Okay, but because it takes the form of method number 2, I think that, yes, I can deduce that 수진 already thinks that the answer is yes. 수진 thinks that 민주 comes here often. She's just looking for confirmation, or she just wants you to agree with her. Okay. So number 3 would also be an answer. And number 4, 기태 is indifferent. Yeah, is also an answer. Because once again, 기태 didn't say 모르겠어요. 기태 said 몰라요. So that does sound like 기태 is very indifferent. Okay, so yes, for question number 5, the answer would be 2, 3, and 4. Okay, and for question number 6, this would be the answer. Okay, now let's move on to question number, question number 7. Okay, sorry about that. So, based on the conversation, which of the followings can you deduce to be true? Okay, so this time 수진 says 이거 뭐하러 샀어요? Okay, so this is why I kept this on the whiteboard. So you see 러 again, because you have 뭐 하러 샀어요? So you're saying, Sujin is saying, you bought this to do what? So bought, to do. So we have to in between two verbs. You bought this to do what? Okay, so now you could be asking a question. Then why is it 러? Is this something wrong? Is this something that has to be fixed? Because you said you only place 러 when, yes, there is two verbs, but only when the green verb is come or go. Yeah, I did say that, but also what I said is there are a couple of more variables. Okay, so there's an exception to this rule. Now, if you hear someone say 뭐 하러, and then some kind of a verb. Now, this is completely its own situation. So if you try to directly translate it, it sounds like you're saying you did something, let's say just did, because we don't have a specific verb. You did something to do what? So it kind of sounds like someone is asking you the reason why you did something. So for example, if you're saying, I bought something, yeah, in this case, or I made something. If someone says, oh, you made this to do what? Now, actually, this is not a real question. When someone says 뭐하러 plus verb, they're saying, yeah, you did something ridiculous. You shouldn't have done that. So it's not a real question. So the last thing that you want to do is to answer it. Answer actually explaining the reason. If someone says, let's say I made something, I built something, and someone comes along and says, you did something stupid. Why would you do that? And now, so in that case, they would say 뭐하러 and then built. Okay, so or let's say just made. 뭐하러 만들었어요? You made it to do what? The last thing that I want to do is to answer and explain the reason. Oh, I made it to do A, B, and C. I made it to, yes, make my friends proud or whatever. No, this is not a question. They're saying, yeah, why'd you do that? That was stupid. Okay, so yes, this is the exception to this rule. In this case, although the green verb is not come or go, yes, 러 would be used as to. So it's the exception to this rule. You made it to do what? Okay, so once again, always keep in mind this form of a sentence is not a real question, even though you see a question mark. Okay, so you should be actually saying something like, well, it's none of your business. I made it because I wanted to. Yeah, why are you being judgmental? Okay, so yes, this tells me that option number 1 for question number 7 is not actually true. Sujin is interested in what Gitae bought? Of course not. Sujin is saying, 이거 뭐하러 샀어요? You bought this to do what? Actually, therefore, Sujin is saying, you shouldn't have bought this. You made a stupid decision. Why'd you do that? Okay, now, number 2, Gitae is looking forward to cooking. Okay, so Gitae says, 다음 금요일에 요리할 때 쓰려고 샀어요. So what Gitae is saying is, I bought it to use it when I cook next Friday. Okay, now, Gitae could be looking forward to cooking, but there is nothing that necessarily indicates that in this conversation. So based on the conversation that is given, I would say, yeah, I don't know. So I'm not going to say number 2 is an answer. So number 1 is, and then now let's move on to 3. Sujin doesn't like what Gitae bought. Yeah, she doesn't, because she said 뭐하러 샀어요? Okay, so it indicates that Sujin does not like it. So number 1, 3 are answers. And then number 4, there is something grammatically incorrect. Okay, yes, there is. So, now what is it that is grammatically incorrect? So, now, when you're saying something like next Friday, next Tuesday, you're not actually saying next Tuesday. You're saying the Friday of next week. The Tuesday of next week. the Wednesday of next week. So, what do you have to keep in mind when you're using of? First of all, you have the order between the two nouns reversed. So, when you're saying, yes, the Friday of next week comes first, Friday comes last. So actually you should say next week, 다음 주. And then Friday. 금요일. Okay, and then now, sorry, just take a water sip. Sip of water, okay. So, and then the second thing that you have to keep in mind when you're using of is to not place of. So yes, you can attach the 의 particle to the first noun so that it can technically play the role of. But once again, in Korean, it's extremely poetic in most cases. So therefore, don't use it. It's usually too obvious anyway. Because if I look at a house, point at a house, for example, and say, oh, that's the house of my friend, as a way of saying my friend's house. Of course, I'm saying, I can just say house of my friend. So house of my friend. So friend house. Order reversed. I can just say 친구 집 friend house. I don't have to say friend's house or house of my friend. I don't need the 의 particle because of course if I'm pointing at a house and I'm saying it's my friend's house, of course I'm saying, I'm sorry, if I say it's my friend house, of course I'm saying it's my friend's house. I'm not saying, hey, look at that. It's my friend. The house. Of course, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying the house is alive and therefore is my friend. I'm not saying that. So it's usually too obvious anyway. So if you go out of your way to place it, you just sound extremely poetic. Okay, so that's why I wouldn't have said 다음 금요일, next Friday. I would have said Friday of next week. 다음 주 금요일. Okay. So, yes. Now, therefore, number 4 would be an answer. There is something grammatically incorrect. And once again, number 5, Sujin is in a good mood. Of course, we know that this is not true because Sujin said, 이거 뭐하러 샀어요? What? Yeah, so Sujin is basically saying, you bought this? That was stupid. Okay, so Sujin, if anything, is annoyed, is frustrated. Okay, so yeah, for question number 7, the answers would be number 3 and 4. Okay, Sujin does not like what Kite bought, and there is something grammatically incorrect. What is that something that is grammatically incorrect? 다음 주 금요일. Okay. So, 다음 주 금요일 was the answer for question number 8, right? Okay, now let's move on to question number 9. Okay, so Sujin says 거기 되게 멀거든요. Okay, and then 기태 says 그래도 너무 좋아서 사람들 자주 가는데요. Okay, so number 1, there is something grammatically incorrect. Yes, there is. So once again, it goes back to reported speech, right? So yeah, something is ending with 대요. It's usually reported speech. When I am not the original source of the information, someone told me something, therefore I'm just relaying the information to you. Reported speech. And yes, a little while ago we talked about it, right? If 대요 is what you see as reported speech, then it means that the reported speech is delivering information that the listener does not know. Okay, so someone told Kite that people still go there because it's so good, whatever good means. Okay, that depends on the context. So Sujin is saying that place is very far. And Kite is saying, well, I heard that, reported speech, I heard that people still go because it's so good. Okay, so it sounds like Kite, someone told Kite that people still go there because it's so good, and Sujin does not know this. Okay, that people still go because it's so good. Okay, so now, yes, once again, right now, so I know so we're using tail, but we also have to take into consideration that it's a shapeshifter, right? So it depends on how it will shapeshift depending on the two factors. Is it being given to a verb, adjective, or noun, and what's the tense? So it's being given to verb present tense, right? Because I'm saying, 기태 is saying, I heard that people still go often. I'm not saying people still went. I'm not saying people still will go. I'm saying people still go often because it's so good. So in that case, now, if the display form of the verb you're using ends with a consonant once 다 is removed, then it would be 는데요. But if it ends with a vowel once 다 is removed, then it's 엔데요. Okay, so what do I mean by that? The display form of go, it ends with a vowel once 다 is removed. So yeah, it should have been 엔데요, 간대요. Okay, so that's why I would say number one is an answer. There is something grammatically incorrect. Okay, so, and of course that would be the answer for question number 10. If there is something grammatically incorrect, describe how you would fix it. This is how I would fix it. Okay, so number 2. Sujin was expecting Kite to agree. Okay, now I wouldn't say that this is the answer. Yes, because, well, it could have been. Yeah, Sujin might have been thinking that, but right now there is nothing that necessarily indicates that. So I wouldn't say number 2 would be an answer. Okay, so number 1 is. And then let's move on to number 3. Okay, Sujin is baffled. Now I would say this is true because we're using the 거든요 ending. The 거든요 ending in large does two things. Number 1, it's either indicating some kind of a reason for something. So when you want to indicate that something is the reason for something without having to say because or so. So it just does it. It just indicates that it's the reason by imbuing that nuance that something is the reason for something so that you don't actually have to say because or so. For example, let's say someone offers me a cup of coffee, but it's late at night. So I'm going to say, well, thank you, but I can't drink coffee right now. And the person says, oh, yeah, may I ask why? And I'm going to say, well, 커피 마시면 못 자다. The display form of sleep. But because 거든요 is a no route ending, I can say 못 자거든요. Just immediately attach it after you remove 다. Okay, that's the beauty of no route endings, right? So yeah, as you can see, if someone says, oh, you can't drink coffee, why? I'm saying, oh, 커피 마시면 못 자거든요. So I'm not actually saying because, I'm just indicating that this is the reason why I cannot drink coffee. So 거든요 doesn't mean because or so. It's just an ending that has the function of indicating that something is a reason. Therefore, it saves you from having to say because or so. So we're basically saying because can't sleep if drink coffee without actually saying because. Okay, so that's number 1. What's function number 2 then? It indicates that it is storytelling time. Therefore, the speaker is asking the listener to listen. So what I mean by this is, let's say I was supposed to meet a friend. So I was waiting for him. I got here first. So he comes and says, Oh, or let's say, I'm gonna say, hey, I'm talking to a 친구, my friend, and I'm gonna say, hey, is something wrong? You seem to be in a little bit of a bad mood. And he says, well, I met a friend. 친구 만났어요. But once again, because I'm using two endings at the same time, right? I'm giving it the past tense ending, and then I'm going to give it the 거든요 ending. So I'm going to stop at the double S, and then attach the 거든요. So, in this case, does it feel like my friend already finished his story? Or does it feel like he's just about to start to tell a story? So I said, hey, is something wrong? You seem to be in a little bit of a bad mood. And he says, well, actually, I met a friend. Okay. And now it feels like he's about to start a story, right? So that's what 거든요 does. So if someone uses 거든요 for reason number 2, the last thing that you want to do is to start speaking. No, this person just told you without saying anything, listen up. I'm right now just starting to storytell. Okay, so please listen up. I'm just getting started. The last thing that you want to do is to talk. You should be listening. Okay, so then how do I know if they are using it for function number 1 or 2? Well, of course, the context also helps you know how it's being used, why it's being used, but for sometimes if you are confused, also the tone can be a hint too. If the tone goes down, or let's say it doesn't necessarily go down and it doesn't necessarily go up, just 거든요, then usually it's function number 1. They're indicating some kind of a reason. If it goes up, now it's usually reason number 2. So they're saying, hey, I'm saying this so that I can use this sentence as a preface to a long story, some kind of a story that I'm about to start telling. Okay, so listen up. That's what they're doing. So now, 수진, let's say this is how the conversation started. 수진 says, 거기 되게 멀거든요. That place is very far. Okay, so if this is how the conversation started, of course, 수진 is not using it for function number 1. Because if someone starts a conversation by saying because, that's very confusing, right? So if someone just walks up to me and says, because I'm tired, I'm gonna say, huh? Because you're tired what? Yeah, you didn't, yeah, we weren't talking before this. What are you talking about? What because you're tired? Okay, so of course, now Sujin is not using it for reason number 1. It means that Sujin is saying, hey, that place is very far, and then is about to start storytelling. Something like, hey, that place is very far, so I thought that it would take about 8 hours by flight, so I booked a plane with a friend, but you know what happened? Now, there was this storm, so we were stuck at the airport for 2 days, and actually the flight was 14 hours. So we got there, but we were late for our hotel, and the hotel said something like, well, we're not seeing your booking. There must be some kind of a mistake. And then we had to book another hotel, something like that. Okay, so it means that Sujin, by saying 거든요, is just starting to storytell. Okay, so now Sujin was just getting started. But 기태 said something. It doesn't matter what he said. 기태 said something. He said, 그래도 너무 좋아서 사람들 자주 가는데요. So if you put yourself in Sujin's shoes, you could be baffled. Hey, I just told you, please listen up. I'm starting to storytell. And then 기태 just talked over me. So, yeah, number 3, Sujin is baffled. I would say that is true. Okay, so number 1, 3 are answers. Number 4, 기태 thinks that Sujin has already been there. Okay, now I wouldn't say that's true because, once again, 기태 used a form of reported speech, but he used 대요. Now versus 다면서요, right? 다면서요 is when The reported speech is delivering information that the listener already does know. So if Kite thinks that Sujin has already been there and therefore has seen that a lot of people are there, then Kite would have used this form of reported speech to indicate that, hey, I heard that a lot of people go there. You must know this because you've been there, right? Okay, but Kite said Teo, which is a form of reported speech that you use when the reported speech is delivering information that the listener does not know. Okay, so Kite does not think that Sujin has already been there. So number 4 can't be the answer. Can't be an answer. Number 5, this is not the first time Kite is saying this. Now, this could be the case, but based on the conversation that is given, there is nothing that necessarily indicates that. Okay, so for question number 9, I would say number 1 and 3 are the answers. Okay, so now let's move on to, and of course, yes, we broke down already what the answer for question number 10 would be, right? Okay, so now let's move on to question number 11. Which is the reasonable pick as the sentence to fill in the blank? Okay, so Kite says, 연휴 때 갈 곳 정했어요? So Kite is saying, yes, in the period of holidays, 갈 곳. So place to go. So the L can be a version of to when you're placing it in between a noun and a verb. When you say, I don't have time to go. I don't have a reason to lie. I don't have a coat to wear. Okay, so in this case, yes, the verb and noun, the order will be reversed and you'll give the verb the L ending according to inflection route number 2. That's why we have place to go in the period of holidays. So, yeah. And then 정하다, decide. But we gave it the past tense ending, right? According to inflection route number 1. So basically, Kite is asking, yeah, did you decide the place to go in the period of holidays? Okay, so we have a holiday. We have holidays coming up. Did you decide where to go for vacation? Okay, and then Sujin says, well, 친구가 계획 다 짰대요. Okay, so Sujin is giving the subject a subject particle. Okay, to pinpoint, right? Number 1, to say, oh, you're asking me. Well, yeah, you shouldn't be asking me. It's my friend who can really answer that question. So when you're shifting focus point, you're carrying a pinpointing nuance, right? We're shifting focus point from here to here. Oh, no, it's not this that you should be focused on. It's this. So I'm saying, oh, you're asking me. Oh, well, yeah, I shouldn't be the person you're asking. It's my friend who can really answer those questions. So pinpointing. So once again, don't give a subject or object particle to a subject or object for no reason. That's what you do in poetic Korean, right? In real Korean, you need a specific reason. Right now, I'm using it to pinpoint. I'm sorry, Sujin is using it to pinpoint. And then, yeah, 계획, plan, 다. 다 is used when you're saying all or all of with a noun, right? All of the plan. So the whole plan. And then 짜다 would be a version of saying like put together. Okay, but once again, we have reported speech. Okay, and reported speech, past tense version. Reported speech, verb, past tense version. So reported speech is a shapeshifter, right? So, yeah, when you're using the Teo version, when the reported speech is delivering information that the listener does not know, and you're giving it to a verb in past tense, double S Teo, inflection route number 1. So, yeah, Sujin is saying, well, I heard that. My friend told me that. Yeah, she, put together. I heard that she put together all of the plan, the whole plan. My friend did, not me. So 친구가 계획 다 짰대요. I heard that my friend put together all of the plan, the whole plan. Okay, and then Kite says, yeah, 엄청 a version of very that you can use. There are a whole bunch of poetic traps when it comes to very, right? 엄청 멀리, far, as an adverb. 가는 거. So what is 는 거 doing here? I'm using it as a no route ending to indicate a gerund when you're taking a verb and you're giving it noun properties, right? When you're saying, I like swimming. I took the verb swim, but I gave it ing so that it now has noun properties because I can only use a noun as an object. I like coffee, coffee the object. I like summer, summer the object. I like this song, song the object. I like swimming. Okay, so going. So going very far. 엄청 멀리 가는 거. And then don't like. 안 좋아하다. But I'm using it the 조 plus question mark ending, right? What can it do? 조 can do a lot of things, but most of the things that it can do is something that it shouldn't be doing, right? Because it's too poetic. But one of the things that it can do in real Korean is, to be paired with a question mark to imbue the nuance of saying, right, at the end. When you already think you have the answer, but you're just looking for confirmation, right? So I'm saying, don't like going very far, right? So 엄청 멀리 가는 거 안 좋아하죠? Okay, and then 수진 says something that leads 기태. So 수진 says something that leads 기태 to once again say, well, 네, that is correct. 비행기 타는 거. So once again, a gerund. 타는 거. So ride. In Korean, when you're talking about a form of transportation, you would use 타다, ride. But once again, I didn't use the display form of it. I once again gave it the no route ending 는 거, the gerund ending. So riding airplanes. And then 사실, actually, 조금, a little, and then, 무섭다. But of course, I don't want a display form, so what 기태 did, I should say, is to inflect it according to the rules of inflection route number 1. So remove 다, remove be, add wall, and then what he did was give it the 하다 ending. Okay, so the 하다 ending that belongs to inflection route number 1 can be the find adjective ending, right? When you say, I find it boring, I find it interesting, I find it difficult, I find it easy. So I find it scary. Okay, as a way of saying, I'm scared of something. And then, we see the 거든요 ending one more time. So in this case, according to the context, I think he's using it for function number 1 to indicate reason. So now we have the full context. Now, let's use our reading comprehension skills now. So, to now deduce what Sujin said then. So, number 1. Did Sujin say, 네, 멀면 피곤해요. 비행기 타는 거 좋아해요? So, Sujin is saying, it's exhausting if it's far. So, Gite said, you don't like going very far, right? And number 1 is suggesting that Sujin said, that is correct. 네. It's exhausting if it's too far. If it's far. 멀면 피곤해요. And then 비행기 타는 거 좋아해요? Do you like riding airplanes? I don't think number 1 makes any sense. Because if Sujin said, do you like riding airplanes? Then Gite wouldn't have said, yes, that is correct. I find riding airplanes scary. Actually a little scary. That makes no sense. That's contradicting. Okay, so now number 2. Did Sujin say 피곤해서 멀리 가는 거 싫어한다고요? Okay, so once again, Sujin is saying, did you say you don't like going far because it's exhausting? Sujin asked Gite that question. 피곤해서 멀리 가는 거 싫어한다고요? Did you say you don't like going far? You hate going far because it's exhausting? I don't think that makes any sense either. Because then, Gite wouldn't have said, that is correct. I find riding airplanes actually a little scary. So it sounds like, yeah, it's just completely irrelevant. Sujin was talking about, oh, you don't like going far because it's exhausting, and Kite's just talking about airplanes. Yeah, I find airplanes a little bit scary. So I don't think the context is flowing seamlessly. Okay, and one more thing when it comes to two. Now, a little while ago, we used the 다고요 ending, right? And I said it is used when you are repeating something that you already said, and usually you do it when you're a little bit annoyed. It can also actually be used with a question mark when you're double checking what you heard. So in this case, if there's a question mark, it's kind of like saying, "Hey, did you say this? So I think I heard you said this, but can you please repeat? I'm double checking. Did you say this? Did I hear correctly? Or did I understand correctly?" Okay, so yes, just like 다고요 was a shapeshifter when there is no question mark, yes, it's a shapeshifter when there is a question mark as well, when you're using it to double check. So it depends how it looks like. That depends. So yes, when you're giving it to a verb in present tense, because we're saying, did you say you hate going far? I'm not saying, did you say you hated or you will hate? I'm not saying that. I'm saying hate, verb in present tense. So if the verb that you're using ends with a consonant, once 다 is removed, the display form of it, then 는다고요. 는다고요. And if it ends with a vowel, 엔다고요. 엔다고요. Okay, yeah, so that's why we have 싫어하다, hate. The display form ends with a vowel once 다 is removed. That's why we have 엔다고요. Okay, I just wanted to break that down. So did you say you hate? Did I hear correctly? Okay. But anyway, number 2 is not the answer. It doesn't really fit the context, right? And then number 3, did Sujin say 보통 가까운 곳만 가요? I go only close places usually. And then 멀리 가는 거 좋아하죠? You like going far, right? I don't think this fits the context either, because if Sujin said, yeah, I go to only close places usually, you don't like going far, right? Now, I'm sorry, if Sujin says 멀리 가는 거 좋아하죠? You like going far, right? Then 기태 wouldn't have said, I find riding airplanes very scary, actually a little scary. That doesn't make any sense. Sujin just said, you like going far, right? 기태 saying, that is correct. I find riding airplanes actually a little scary. That makes no sense. So number 3 also is not the answer. Number 4 is Sujin saying, 멀리 안 가죠. So 조, one of the things that it can do is to imbue the nuance of course, if it's not paired with a question mark. So I'll take a sip of water. Okay. So, yes. So number 4, did Sujin say 멀리 안 가죠? Of course, I don't go far. 비행기 무서워하죠? So this time, 조 was used with, the second time, 조 was used with a question mark, which means that it's imbuing the nuance of right. Okay, so Sujin is saying, of course I don't go far. You find airplanes scary, right? Okay, now, in this case, also, I wouldn't say number 4 is the answer, because that would make it weird. Sujin said, you find airplanes scary, right? And Kite is saying, yes, that is correct. I actually find riding airplanes a little scary. So that makes no sense, right? So it feels like when B is saying, I actually find riding airplanes a little scary. Now in Korean, yes, you're using it only to indicate that you're revealing something. I actually. So, yeah, there is nothing to reveal. Sujin already knew it. Sujin said, yeah, you find riding airplanes scary, right? So all B had to say was, yeah, that is correct. 네. So when Sujin says, you find airplanes a little scary, and if Kite says, that is correct. Now I'm revealing something. I actually find airplanes a little scary. That makes no sense. Okay, so number 5 would be the answer. 멀면 안 가요. I don't go if it's far. 멀리 가는 거 안 좋아하죠? You don't like going far, right? Now this makes sense. If Sujin says, you don't like going very far, right? Kite would say, that is correct. I actually find riding airplanes a little scary. So, yeah, once again, 거든요 is indicating reason. So when Sujin says, you don't like going very far, right? I'm sorry. Yeah, you don't like going far, right? So Kite says, that is correct. Yeah, I don't like it because I actually find riding airplanes a little scary. So now it does make sense. So I would say, according to the whole flow of the context, number 5 would be the answer for question number 11. Okay, now let's move on to question number 12 then. Once again, which is the reasonable pick as the sentence to fill in the blank? Okay, so once again, this time, Sujin says, 저도 이거 좋아해요. I also like this. I also like this. 저도 이거 좋아해요. And then Kite says, oh, you do? Well, yeah, I also 이것만 only this drink 마셔요. Okay, so now there are 3 versions of this, right? 이거, and 이것. Okay, so of course, yes, this is only a version that you would use when you're placing this in front of some kind of a noun. For example, when I say I bought this marker. But I can also say I bought this, right? Just I can use this alone as the noun, as the pronoun. Okay, so then what's the difference? Well, if that's the case, if I'm using this alone as the noun, then it's either 이거 or 이것. Okay, so when do I keep the extra consonant at the end? In poetic Korean, you can keep it for no reason whatsoever, just because you can. But in real Korean, you only keep it for now in large in 3 typical situations, right? When you are giving it the plural particle, therefore you're saying these. When you're giving it the do particle, also, in other words as well, in other words too, when you're saying not just that, but this too, 이것도. And when you're giving it the only particle, not that, only this, 이것만. Okay, so that's why in this case there is no 이거 because I'm not attaching one of the 3 particles, but in this case there is the extra s here because I'm giving it the only particle. So Sujin says, I also like this. So let's say, yeah, it seems like they're talking about something that Kite is drinking. So Kite says, oh, well, is that true? Well, I also drink only this. So Sujin says, 얼음 없이 without ice 마시면. So if drink without ice, more delicious. 더 more 맛있어요. Delicious. Okay, so and then Sujin says something again, which leads Kite to say 차갑게, coldly. Yes, in Korean you say coldly, warmly. 마시는 거, once again the gerund ending. Drinking coldly. 습관인가 봐요. Okay, so I guess drinking, so 인가 봐요. Okay, so when you're giving it to a noun, yes, in present tense, then it would usually be 인가 봐요, the guess ending. So guess is also a shapeshifter, an irregular ending. Okay, so I'm giving it to the noun habit. Yes, I guess it's a habit. 습관, I'm sorry. 인가 봐요. Okay, so I'm saying drinking, the ing gerund ending, drinking coldly, I guess it's a habit. Okay, so I guess drinking coldly, I guess drinking coldly is a habit. 차갑게 마시는 거, the subject, and then the subject complement, right? When you're saying a noun is a noun, then you're saying a subject is a subject complement. So subject drinking coldly, because once again, the 는거 ending is used to form a gerund. In other words, to take a verb but now change it into a noun. So now you have a noun. Drinking coldly is a habit, I guess. Okay, so that's what you're saying. 차갑게 마시는 거 습관인가 봐요. Okay, so now we have the whole context. Then what did 수진 say? Number one, 지금 안 차갑잖아요. So the 잖아요 ending is used to imbue the nuance of I am saying something that you already know as well, or at least you should know as well, right? So number one, did Sujin say, it's not cold right now? You know this, right? Yeah, come on, look at it. You should know this too. Did Sujin say that? I don't think it really fits the context, because Kite says, yeah, I always drink it cold. I guess it's a habit. Yeah, I drink it coldly. So if it's a habit, yeah, it seems like he's doing it right now too. So I think it is cold. So number one, it's not cold right now. You already know this too, right? I don't think you already know this too. I don't think that fits the context. Okay, number two, 저도 춥게만 마시잖아요. Okay, so now this also I wouldn't say is the answer. So there are in large, of course, the typical two, 춥다 versus 차갑다. Two versions of cold, right? Of course, at some point you have to know many more versions of cold, but the most typical big two, 춥다 versus 차갑다. Now, more so than the whole flow of the context this time, yes, what makes number two not the right answer, well, would be more so, yeah, the version of cold that is being used, because it completely changes the meaning and context depending on, yes, which version you're using. And sometimes it makes your sentence not even make any sense at all. Okay, so 춥다 is when you're talking about, sorry about that, yeah. You're talking about a three-dimensional physical space or area that is big enough to influence your whole body. That's why you use it when you're talking about weather. When I say it's cold in Korea these days, well, Korea is a part of this planet. So this part of this planet is a three-dimensional physical space or area that is big enough to influence my whole body. So, on the other hand, 차갑다 is anything other than that. So for example, if I walk into this room and I say, oh, it's cold in here, this room, then it's 춥다 because this room is a three-dimensional physical space or area that is big enough to influence my whole body. On the other hand, if I say, oh, this marker is cold, then I'm going to say 차갑다 because this marker, I'm not going to look at it as some kind of a three-dimensional physical space or area that is big enough to influence my whole body. So it's 차갑다. Okay, and also if I'm going to say, well, his attitude was very cold, he seemed very indifferent, then in that case, yeah, 차갑다, because his attitude is not a three-dimensional physical space or area that is big enough to influence my whole body, right? Okay, so yes, we're talking about something that we're drinking, something that is in a cup. Of course, I'm not going to look at this liquid as a three-dimensional physical space or area that is in the cup. Three-dimensional physical space or area that is big enough to influence my whole body. This cup. Okay, so yes. Therefore, I should have used 차갑다. So number two, 저도 춥게만, that makes no sense. It should have been 차갑게만. Okay, so number 3 is Sujin saying 따뜻하면 엄청 맛있다면서요. Okay, so now I wouldn't say this sounds very natural because, yes, she's using once again the 다면서요 reported speech ending. So it indicates that this reported speech is delivering something that the listener already knows. Okay, so now when you're doing this, when you're saying, hey, I heard that something is the case, and you know this, right? So now usually what they're doing is, because I'm saying that you, something that you are knowledgeable in, so I'm kind of asking you to speak on it in any way, shape, or form. So I want you to say something about this. But yes, 기태 doesn't seem like 기태 is directly, yes, addressing something like addressing the fact that, yes, it's delicious if it's warm. 기태 would have at least said something like, yeah, I agree. Yeah, yeah, I agree. Or like, I disagree. I tried it once, but I don't think so. Or something like, well, it depends on how warm. So, yes, when someone uses the 다면서요 ending, the reported speech ending, but when the reported speech is delivering information that the listener likely already knows, then they're kind of doing it to ask you to speak on it, to comment on it. Okay, but 기태, although Sujin is very directly asking 기태 to comment on it, 기태 is making it sound like he just completely didn't hear what Sujin said. Okay, and now number 4. 시원할수록 맛있대요. Okay, so now what is the el 수록 ending doing here? The el 수록 ending is not a meaning word, it's a function word. Okay, so with meaning words, now you don't with function words, you don't translate their meaning, you understand their functions, right? Okay, so now the el 수록 ending, which belongs to inflection route number 2, indicates that the degree of two things are in direct proportion. Direct proportion. What do I mean by that? Okay, so when you're saying something like the bigger, the heavier. So it means that the degree of the size and weight are in direct proportion. So that's how you use it. So because it belongs to inflection route number 2, I'm going to take the display form of big and say 클수록. 클수록. And then, yes, 무거워요. 클수록 무거워요. Okay, so yes, it indicates that the size, the degree of size, and the degree of weight are in direct proportion, as just like when you're saying the bigger, the heavier. Okay, so therefore, number 4 says 시원할수록 맛있대요. I heard that it's more delicious. The more I heard that, the more cool, the cooler it is, the more delicious. Okay, so once again, now it feels like 기태 is just saying something completely irrelevant then. 차갑게 마시는 거 습관인가 봐요. Okay, so yes, because Sujin says the cooler it is, the more delicious. Then 기태 would have said, well, something like, oh yeah, that's why I drink it coldly. But yes, 기태 saying, I guess drinking it coldly is a habit. I don't think, yes, the two sentences are really in the same context. Okay, and then number 5, Sujin says 따뜻하게 마실수록, once again the el 수록 ending, 맛있어요. So the warmer you drink it, the more delicious it is. Okay, now this can be the answer. So because, yeah, it can be that Sujin is suggesting that, yeah, it's the warmer it is, the actually it's more delicious. So 기태 is saying, oh, well, okay, yeah. I guess that can be true. I guess, yeah, I just drink it coldly because it's a habit, not because it's better when it's cold. Yeah, as you said, it might be better when it's warm. The warmer it is, the more delicious it is. It might be the case. I guess if that's the case, I'm just drinking it coldly, not because it's better, it tastes better, but it's just because it's become a habit. Okay, so I would say number 5 is can be a reasonable pick. So the answer for question number 12, number 5.